two.
Peace, everybody. Thank you for joining us at Disrupt the Chaos. We're waiting for our guests to come on, Jay Jordan. So we're going to go right into the show because his time is limited. So I'm going to have Tondi, our producer, pull up a video that we have of Jay while we get him on. Okay. Play the Portland one. There's no sound on this. It's buffering.
How's that now? Huh? How is that? How is that? Man, you should feel this. How is it now? They learned that. Take a breath, man. They learned that. You should stay in there, Chad. 50 did that 59. You should stay in there.
Yeah, so we're still waiting for our guests, and we have some other video. That's video from Portland, Oregon, and federal troops that have been in their city now for over a week. And yesterday, 45 said he would dispatch more federal troops to Chicago, Seattle, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Kansas City, St. Louis. I know I'm missing one of the other Midwest states, and he's probably going to add more. So, like, pretty much a full occupation in most every space, you know, and it's getting little to no coverage, which is really bad. It's horrible because once federal troops are there, you're dealing with the federal government and the military might, you know, and that's just a whole different beast. So if we have some video while I try to get Jay on and see what's happening.
I am Jay. I am a husband, father, a creative, a brother, an organizer, and an advocate. When I was 19, I was sentenced to 7 years, 8 months in California State Prison. Unfortunately, my family and I faced thousands of legal restrictions long after I finished parole. Every time I want to take that next step in my life, can I really do this? Let me check to see if I'm able to. I remember trying to become a barber, and I couldn't do that. I tried to sell used cars. I tried to sell insurance, real estate. I couldn't do that. I actually, started a volunteer program at the high school in Stockton. It was going well until they found out that I had a conviction. And the night before, the school district called me and said, "You have a felony. You cannot do this. Shut down your program." And I remember that night I cried for the first time in decades. And the list goes on and on. There was just a mountain of barriers that me and my family faced, and it was affecting us heavily. When I look at my son, you know, I don't want him growing up in a world where his dad is considered a criminal. And I've done everything I could possibly do. I served my time. I did everything they asked of me. It's been 14 years since I committed a crime. The sad part is I'm going to die with these collateral consequences. The Time Done movement is essentially an organizing effort to shine a light on these thousands and thousands and thousands of barriers that Americans face long after they completed their sentence. And that takes public education, organizing, voting. People across the country are standing up, standing together and saying, the time is now. No more prolonged imprisonment, no more lifetime barriers, no more pain and frustration, no more poverty because of a conviction. And change is happening. Like in Florida, they're saying yes to Amendment 4 this November, which would restore the voting rights of 1.68 million people with felonies. In California, we passed Prop 47 and Prop 64 that gave millions of Californians an opportunity to reduce low-level offenses to misdemeanors. But more is needed. That's why we're here. That's why we started Time Done. We're getting more organized, talking to public officials. We're going local. We're knocking on doors, hitting phones, registering people to vote. We need your help. The movement looks like me, and it also looks like you. There is a sense of historic presence in this moment that we are making history. You know, the ancestral obligation to want to help 70 million Americans, to want to help families across this country that are struggling. Take 30 seconds to go to timedone.org and sign the pledge and add your name to a movement that's shining a light on the tens of thousands of legal restrictions that bar people from everyday life long after they serve their sentence and paid their debt. We need you.
Yeah, so that's our guest, and anything could be happening, so hopefully he'll come on. That is Jay Jordan, who talks about his incarceration and now is the executive director of Californians for Safety and Justice. So while we wait for Jay, and I actually made a call to a couple other people if they could drop in, but as we wait for Jay, I think today, I don't know how many people saw AOC's masterful takedown response of the representative. I don't even want to say it, whatever. He's a Republican side. They're all the same to me, and they all look the same. So whoever he was called her a fucking bitch on the steps of, you know, the Congress, the congressional building. They had a heated exchange politically, and she said something, and then he called her a fucking bitch, and that's what he called her. And now there's particularly like women of color, congressional people and senators and men as well, and men of color that are calling for him to be censured, which is apparently a really big deal. It just means like everybody else in your Congress is like, don't do that again. That's a bad thing to do. So I don't know about accountability, but man, was this takedown masterful. And I have to say, like, it's so good. We're going to play the whole 10 minutes of it, because I know a lot of people are like, cannot watch a TV or Zoom anymore. I was watching C-SPAN when it happened, and then I watched it, then I put it on Instagram Live just in case. Some people don't even have TV. They don't watch C-SPAN, or most people seen it maybe. But with all that said, we're going to play it. You know, and it just really goes to the heart of what she said. We've been dealing with patriarchy as women and non-gender conforming people since we were born, you know, but we're going to show that and try to get Jay on. If not, we'll just do a Q&A, especially like, what's a hot topic right now? Oh yeah, federal troops into our communities. We could even talk about Afro-Latinx identity and why I refer to myself as a Black Latinx woman and don't want to be a brand. We can talk about that too. So let's play AOC and then we'll come back, you know, and we'll either have Jay on or we'll take some Q&As for everybody. So let me know what's going on. And I'll be checking on Instagram, Twitter, on Instagram while we see if anybody has questions or questions. All right, so we're going to play the AOC Brilliance Takedown.
About 2 days ago, I was walking up the steps of the Capitol when Representative Yoho suddenly turned a corner, and he was accompanied by Representative Roger Williams, and accosted me on the steps right here in front of our nation's Capitol. I was minding my own business, walking up the steps, and Representative Yoho put his finger in my face. He called me disgusting. He called me crazy. He called me out of my mind. And he called me dangerous. And then he took a few more steps. And after I had recognized his comments as rude, he walked away and said, "I'm rude. You're calling me rude." I took a few steps ahead and I walked inside and cast my vote. Because my constituents send me here each and every day to fight for them and to make sure that they are able to keep a roof over their head, that they're able to feed their families, and that they're able to carry their lives with dignity. I walked back out and there were reporters in the front of the Capitol, and in front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, "a fucking bitch." These are the words that Representative Yoho levied against a congresswoman, the congresswoman that not only represents New York's 14th congressional district, but every congresswoman and every woman in this country, because all of us have had to deal with this in some form, some way, some shape, at some point in our lives. And I want to be clear that Representative Yoho's comments were not deeply hurtful or piercing to me, because I have worked a working class job. I have waited tables in restaurants. I have ridden the subway. I have walked the streets in New York City. And this kind of language is not new. I have encountered words uttered by Mr. Yoho and men uttering the same words as Mr. Yoho while I was being harassed in restaurants. I have tossed men out of bars that have used language like Mr. Yoho's. And I have encountered this type of harassment riding the subway in New York City. This is not new. And that is the problem. Mr. Yoho was not alone. He was walking shoulder to shoulder with Representative Roger Williams. And that's when we start to see that this issue is not about one incident. It is cultural. It is a culture of lack of impunity, of accepting of violence and violent language against women, and an entire structure of power that supports that. Because not only have I been spoken to disrespectfully, particularly by members of the Republican Party and elected officials in the Republican Party, not just here, but the President of the United States last year told me to go home to another country, with the implication that I don't even belong in America. The governor of Florida, Governor DeSantis, before I even was sworn in, called me a whatever that is. Dehumanizing language is not new. And what we are seeing is that incidents like these are happening in a pattern. This is a pattern of an attitude towards women and dehumanization of others. So while I was not deeply hurt or offended by little comments that are made, when I was reflecting on this, I honestly thought that I was just going to pack it up and go home. It's just another day, right? But then yesterday, Representative Yoho decided to come to the floor of the House of Representatives and make excuses for his behavior. And that I could not let go. I could not allow my nieces, I could not allow the little girls that I go home to, I could not allow victims of verbal abuse and worse to see that excuse, and to see our Congress accept it as legitimate and accept it as an apology, and to accept silence as a form of acceptance. I could not allow that to stand, which is why I'm rising today to raise this point of personal privilege. And I do not need Representative Yoho to apologize to me. Clearly, he does not want to. Clearly, when given the opportunity, he will not. And I will not stay up late at night waiting for an apology from a man who has no remorse over calling women and using abusive language towards women. But what I do have issue with is using women, our wives and daughters, as shields and excuses for poor behavior. Mr. Yoho mentioned that he has a wife and 2 daughters. I am 2 years younger than Mr. Yoho's youngest daughter. I am someone's daughter too. My father, thankfully, is not alive to see how Mr. Yoho treated his daughter. My mother got to see Mr. Yoho's disrespect on the floor of this house towards me on television. And I am here because I have to show my parents that I am their daughter and that they did not raise me to accept abuse from men. Now, what I am here to say is that this harm that Mr. Yoho tried to levy against me was not just an incident directed at me. But when you do that to any woman, what Mr. Yoho did was give permission to other men to do that to his daughters. He gave, in using that language in front of the press, he gave permission to use that language against his wife, his daughters, women in his community. And I am here to stand up to say that is not acceptable. I do not care what your views are. It does not matter how much I disagree or how much it incenses me or how much I feel that people are dehumanizing others. I will not do that myself. I will not allow people to change and create hatred in our hearts. And so what I believe is that having a daughter does not make a man decent. Having a wife does not make a decent man. Treating people with dignity and respect makes a decent man. And when a decent man messes up, as we all are bound to do, he tries his best and does apologize. Not to save face, not to win a vote. He apologizes genuinely to repair and acknowledge the harm done so that we can all move on. Lastly, what I want to express to Mr. Yoho is gratitude. I want to thank him for showing the world that you can be a powerful man and accost women. You can have daughters and accost women without remorse. You can be married and accost women. You can take photos and project an image to the world of being a family man and accost women without remorse and with a sense of impunity. It happens every day in this country. It happened here on the steps of our nation's capital. It happens when individuals who hold the highest office in this land admit to hurting women and using this language against all of us. But once again, I thank my colleagues for joining us today. I will reserve the hour of my time, and I will yield to my colleague, Representative Jayapal of Washington. Thank you.
Yeah, I lost the Wi-Fi on my end, so sorry about that. I do want people to finish watching it. So, Tandi, can we pick up from where we left? Probably not. Yeah. Yeah, it was finished. Well, anyway, everybody saw most of it, so that's where we're at. All right, so I don't know what happened to our guests. I hope everything's all right, but if anybody's watching, you want to ask us anything, we can do that. And of course, I'll talk about our PP, our political prisoner. So I'm going to change Instagram around. So if anybody to talk, ask me a question and stuff, you can see me, but I won't be able to see your question. So I don't know what to do. Let me think. All right. I'll turn Instagram a little bit towards me and I'll check. So our guest is not on. So I said, maybe we'll just do a Q&A. We just watched AOC's takedown of the representative who called her a fucking bitch. And her tweet is also really dope because she's like, bitches get things done, which I agree 100%. But I mean, it is a master class if you're teaching any young people or just in general of a very methodical takedown of this dude. And, she's a master and she's strategic. And I also appreciated the fact, although I politically disagree with her for the most part, that Congresswoman Nita Velázquez was literally sitting behind her and kind of having her back as a Puerto Rican, as a Boricua woman. I thought I love seeing that, because they are now the only two Puerto Ricans in Congress, so it was good to see Nita Velázquez, who's been there for a minute, and has made some bad political missteps around Promesa and that, yet it was still good to see her, like, an elder, basically, like, I got your back, because the intent of that was to scare her or to have her break down. And I don't think that these folks understand that she's not going to be broken. Like, yeah, Melissa, we can see questions here. So if you have any questions for me on Instagram or here on StreamYard, let me know. So in the meantime, I am going to, we probably have some stuff on, well, let me wait for Veranza. So we'll end the show with our PP like we always do. Unless I don't get any questions, then I'll just end the show right here. And, I can't do anything about it. So I did call some people, like, can you jump on? But probably like 7 p.m. is when everybody's doing something. There's just a lot of incredible independent media out there that is creating so much incredible content, and, I would say again that it's very, very important that we keep our eye on what's happening with federal troops, because he's going to expand this. And, this is not good. It's just not good. And it's going to be deadly. And you're going to be going into communities that even some of them, if they're gentrified, there's still Black and brown people all over. And we know who you're targeting. I mean, like, it's interesting that they picked Portland at first, but that's where they believe the group Antifa, which there is no group Antifa. It's anti-fascist, a short an acronym basically for anti-fascism, which we should all be. But of course, they would pick Portland first because Portland is, first of all, it's crazy racist, and then it's all the way on the left of like anarchists and how they get down on the streets. So All right, let's see. So Melissa asks, do you feel there's a targeted attack on powerful Latinos right now? No, I think there's a targeted attack at Black and brown women, period. Because it's Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Presley, who for the most part is liberal. I mean, she's not even on the left when you really look at her policies and stuff. Maybe progressive, possibly. But no, I don't think it's against just Latinas. And if it was, I'd have to say which Latinas, those passing for white or those that are Afro-Latinx or indigenous Latino women. Yeah, so, you know. All right. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is I am going to talk about our PP. And, yeah, Tandy, I think that's the question that we got. Yeah, I'm going to talk about our PP and, you know, wrap it up, because I do know that people's time is real fragmented and stuff. And I wasn't ready not to have a guest on, and usually I'd be more out to talking, but sometimes I don't even want to hear the sound of my voice anymore, honestly. But our political prisoner highlight today is Veronza Bowers, who was convicted in the murder of a U.S. park ranger on the word of 2 government informers, both of whom received reduced sentences for other crimes by the federal prosecutor's office. There were no eyewitnesses and no evidence independent of these informants to link him to the crime. At his trial, Veronza offered alibi testimony, which was not credited by the jury, nor was the testimony of 2 relatives of the informers who insisted that they were lying. The informants had all charges against them in this case dropped, and one was given $10,000 by the government, according to the prosecutor's post-sentencing report. Veronza has consistently proclaimed his innocence of the crime he never committed, even at the expense of having his appeals for parole denied, for which an admission of guilt and contrition is virtually required. He insists on maintaining his innocence. On June 21st of 2005 was the day that Veronza Bowers should have been released from federal prison on mandatory parole after more than 31 years of incarceration. This date was based on a vote of the 5-member U.S. Parole Commission in Washington, D.C., the highest governing body in our nation's parole system. At the very last moment, Veronza's release had been canceled. This action was based on a petition filed by the then U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales requesting that the National Appeals Board reconsider their decision granting him parole. This order for reconsideration by the Attorney General was made at the behest of the Fraternal Order of Police. And honestly, the FOP might as well be the KKK in suits and not wearing hoods. They've done this to Jalil Muntaqin, one of our political prisoners that should have been released, that was released, and it's actually the Attorney General, Letitia James, a Black woman, who appealed to the court to not have him released. We've seen this with Sundiata Acoli, and we've seen this with a lot of PPs. They do their time, and then they find another way to keep them incarcerated. So, keep checking out information on political prisoners and prisoners of war, our freedom fighters behind the walls, basically, who have given their lives for freedom of us, but really for freedom of everybody. So, well, this is where I'm going to end the show. I've decided to just put the show on a break right now. And the main reason why, well, there's 2 reasons. One reason is I must finish my dissertation. And anybody out there who's been in a PhD program knows you can be in that ABD status, all up with dissertation, for a very long time. And I have been there for over 4 years, and I should have been graduated. But honestly, I am not a person that likes to write. I've written articles and all of that, and it's usually because something moves me to write. And my dissertation does move me to write. But when you're writing a dissertation, hold on, that's Jay Jordan. So, Tanya, I don't know if there's another video, but I got Jay, so I'm going to take the call. Yes. Huh? Oh, I sent you that earlier, and I was closing the show out because we were expecting you at 7. But yeah, I sent you the link pretty early in the morning. Yeah, we've been waiting for you like the whole time.
Did you know that the United States locks up more people than any other country on Earth? Although Americans make up only 4% of the world's population, 22% of the global prison population is behind bars in our country. Over 2.2 million people are incarcerated in the United States right now. That's more people than are killed by heart disease, cancer, tobacco, and diabetes combined each year. Friends, family, neighbors. Simply put, mass incarceration is one of the biggest issues facing our country today. But it hasn't always been this way. Over the past generation, the U.S. prison population has grown nearly 700%. And it's not because there's more crime these days. In fact, crime has been declining for 20 years, and we're safer today than at any point in a generation. What's driving mass incarceration? New policies that send more people to prison and keep them locked up longer. The cruel twist is that these policies can actually make us less safe. Sending someone to prison removes them from their families, jobs, and social supports, making it even harder for them to succeed and remain crime-free. And the longer the incarceration, the lower the chances of success upon release. A recent study found that each additional year of incarceration increases recidivism by 4 to 7%. In fact, study after study has shown that increasing incarceration rates doesn't make us safer. According to the National Academies of Science, which issued the most definitive research on incarceration to date, lengthy prison sentences are ineffective as a crime control measure. The reduction in crime can be attributed to a number of things, but today's historic and unprecedented levels of incarceration is not one of them. But this massive prison expansion is destabilizing communities. The communities most harmed by crime and violence are also the least supported by the criminal justice system. Spending on prison has more than tripled and now costs the U.S. taxpayers $80 billion each year. Every dollar wasted on prisons could be spent on other priorities like drug and mental health treatment, job training, infrastructure, or education. Prison spending has grown 7 times more than higher education. So if mass incarceration is costing us billions and failing to reduce crime, why are we still doing it? To stop the cycle of crime, we don't need more incarceration. We need investments in new safety priorities rooted in treatment and community health. We need to focus on preventing crime and providing victims with support. Join the Alliance for Safety and Justice today and find out how you can help advance new safety priorities in your state.
Dropped 3 times, so I'm just going to bring Jay on. All right. Jay Jordan has worked at the intersection of social justice and politics throughout his career. During his tenure at the LA Voice, Pico, Jay was instrumental in recruiting and training churches in the South Los Angeles area. He served as one of the lead organizers for the campaign to ban the box for the city of Los Angeles and co-founded Faith in Action. He now is the executive director of Californians for Safety and Justice. And I'm very happy to have him on because I know that the family is about to go somewhere and relax for the weekend. So I actually feel bad. I'm like, oh, I should have just told you. Now it's all good. And he happens to be married to one of the most fabulous women in the world, Carmen Perez. And all right, so Jay, thanks for joining us. It's a little crazy technically, so everybody understand.
Well, thanks for having me, and sorry, technical difficulties. But we're actually out in the forest right now. We just pitched the tent, so we're here.
You're like, we're intense and getting out of the city right now, which I would say is probably one of the best moves right now.
Exactly.
So can you tell people, we showed a video of you earlier where you talked about why you were incarcerated and what you've done since you've come out, but like, where were you born, raised, what you were incarcerated formerly for, and now kind of the work that you're doing with Californians for Safety and Justice.
Yeah, sure. So, I'm from Northside Stockton, right? So, for those of you who don't know where Stockton's at, it's like by Sacramento, a little bit east of the Bay. We're like the armpit of California, and it gets funky there,
Yeah.
And grew up like everybody else, you know what I mean? Black, going to a predominantly white school. My dad was a preacher. He still is. My mom's an old city girl from Watts. My dad, a country preacher from Okmulgee, Oklahoma. And we they worked hard. They taught me the value of partnership, long-term partnership, and hard work to end cycles of intergenerational poverty and trauma. Right? They taught me that, not told me, but taught me that with their actions. And somewhere along the way, I just strayed. 15, started getting involved with like gangs and the whole nine. 18, going on 19, was arrested and convicted for robbery. Served 7.5 years. So 90 months off a 92-month sentence in California State Prison. Halfway through, went to the hole for 2 years, and that's when I really started to question, like being a black man in America, trying to figure out where I fit in the world, who I was, what I was, what I wanted to stand for, and more importantly, who I wanted to be and what the change I wanted to make in my life and in the world. And so I really became introspective during that time. I mean, you start to think a whole lot about life when you're stuck in a box for 2 years, 24 hours a day. And so that was really the pivotal point in my life, was being in that box. And I remember my neighbor, was banging on my wall when I first got to the hole. Because I still have 2 strikes, but in there I had 2 strikes, and I got involved with some stuff while I was in there. And I thought that was going to be my, it was going to be over with. I literally thought that, I was going to do the rest of my life in prison. And so I was reconciling those thoughts and coming to terms with, no one, doing what happened to me but me, right, to myself. And I remember, like, when I first got there, I was sick because I knew that reality had set in, and my neighbor was banging on my wall. Finally I answered him, like, yo, what's up? And he asked me, who are you? And I was like, yo, I'm J.O. from Northside. You know what I mean? I sounded off. And, he was a Jamaican dude. And I remember he said, that's what you are. Ask who you are. Then he starts saying my name over and over and over. J.O., 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 over and over. It was driving me crazy. And then I began to ask myself that question, like, who am I? You know what I mean? Like, and every answer I came up with was like a label that society either put on myself, I put on myself to cover up something that, I was trying to deal with. Somebody told me I was, right? It was never like me sitting back and saying, who am I, right? And so I took those 2 years to really figure that out. And so when I got out this shoe and thank the creator, I didn't get struck out. I made a vow to myself, to my family, that, I was going to become something in this world, and I was going to make my last name mean something and not just be known for, tearing up communities. And so when I got out of prison, I had all these plans. I mean, I literally had I got out when I was 26. I went in when I was 18. I had a whole list of things that I wanted to do. But when I got out, it like really hit me that, selling insurance on the side wasn't going to work because I had a felony. Selling real estate, getting my real estate license wasn't going to work if I had a felony. Selling used cars, right? I wanted to flip cars, wasn't going to work if I had a felony. Open up a barber shop and becoming a barber wasn't going to work if I had a felony.
Yeah.
I ended up selling vending machines, like buying my first vending machine and then buying another one, then grinding. And, with the help of my business, I found the guy who was financing my operation. We grew into the vending machines, but it was, I was making good money, but not money to where I didn't have health care. It was just bad. So I wanted to actually get involved with the community, right? Because in Stockton in 2012, Cats was dying. Cats was, Kings was killing Kings in 2012 in Stockton. And so I wanted to get involved and actually, make a change, and I did that. So I had sold my portion of the business to my business partner, and I had started a mentoring organization or a mentoring program and I went and swallowed my pride and met with every single elected official, law enforcement person in Stockton, because Stockton is a mid to small size city. And I said, you know what? I want to make sure that, what I'm doing, people know I'm serious about it, and I just don't want to make a small change. I really want to make a change. So I went and called the chief of police, called the mayor, called, city council. I was like, I want to meet with y'all because I see there is something going on in my city and it ain't right. Right? What the hell is going on? Right? And so I would meet with them and say, well, let's do something about it. Right? Why is Black unemployment rate triple everybody else? Why is little black kids not graduating high school? Why is young Black men being incarcerated at elevated rates in Stockton? Why is our DA, direct filing young Black boys? What is going on in this city? I'm just not going to be a bystander. I'm going to do something about it.
What year did you get out?
2012.
I wonder, did y'all have a mayor from the Green Party, or am I bugging out?
No, we didn't have the mayor from the Green Party. We had this crazy mayor we had this crazy mayor that came on, and this was the year that Michael Tubbs came back and ran for city council. I got out. I started doing organizing. We had the first Black city manager come to Stockton. We had a progressive police chief, Tubbs, Michael Tubbs.
Right, and then didn't he implement a
universal basic income?
Thank you, a UBI.
Yeah.
And that's right, because I saw him on 60 Minutes talking about it. But I just want to go back to something. So you were in solitary for 2 years, and by all everybody who has done work around solitary confinement calls it what it is, which is torture. I don't know if people understand what that actually means. I think they're like, no, but they get out once a day, and I'm like, no, they don't. No. And but how are you? I mean, you spent a significant amount of time in that period where you're going from a teenager to a fully formed human, especially when they do studies which says that up until 25, you're not fully developed in your mind around consequences and stuff. How do you survive 2 years in solitary and not come out angry or broken?
Yeah, so a few things. One, my mom would get up every morning at 4 a.m. and pray. And every day that I was in prison, she was praying for me. Now, whether or not folks believe in the power of prayer, I do believe that when you speak good intentions and positive affirmations and, you speak protection over people, that energy is going out to the universe and it's coming back. And I believe that because my mama got on her knees every morning, 4 o'clock, and got in that prayer closet and prayed, man, that was the only reason I didn't go crazy in that cell. The other thing was, this sister, she was a psychologist, and she would go around and she would make her rounds. I was in Tehachapi. It's 50 miles north of Bakersfield in the mountains, snowy. It was crazy. And she would make a point to go around all the Black cells and be like, are you all right? You want to talk? And it took me about 8 months to even, say anything to her. But then I was like, you know what? I have to process some of this shit. I like after I shed like this macho, I want to call it toxic, but like this misdirected masculinity that didn't allow me to really, say, hey, I'm going through something traumatic here. I'm going through, figuring out what the hell went wrong in my life. And I was going back to like what was going through my head when I was 10, 11, 12. So it would be deep sessions I would have with myself. And I was processing it, but I didn't have the words, the tools to process it. So I finally said, hey, here's what I want to, here's where I'm at now. And here's where I want to be. And we met probably like 3 or 4 times a week. She would come to my cell for like 10 or 15 minutes and slide me paperwork on how to like process your own thoughts. And so I was like self-diagnosing and like going through deep introspection and psychoanalysis of my life. Like this was some really heavy PhD type shit. You know what I mean? And so that was the second thing. And I think the third thing was, I trace my ancestry to slaves, right? To like Africans who were enslaved. And I remember I was telling my mom, hey, can you send me stuff about my lineage? Send me stuff about like our culture, right? And she would send me like reams and reams and reams of just like one time I asked her to send me stuff on lynching, right? Because this is, I mean, you're talking about a young kid who was raised in church, wouldn't start gang banging. My education wasn't Black liberation, right? Yeah. It was like, colonized Judeo-Christianity, you know what I mean? And so like when she starts sending me all that stuff and I start reading, I'm like, well, wait a minute, And so I had this fire burning inside of me and said, I cannot allow, the people who came before me, right, to have their legacy and what they went through be squandered because, I want to be a knucklehead and run around the streets. And so a mixture of those three things, really drove me to the finish line for those 2 years.
Yeah, so you had a support system, but I mean, and it angers me when I hear people like, I'm on lockdown or I feel like I'm in jail. I'm like, no, you don't. You have 3 bedrooms in your house. Like you don't feel like it's a totally irresponsible comment to make, when people are like, I feel everything's been taken away from me. I'm like, dude, you could walk outside without hearing clink clank or a number instead of your name.
You can walk outside. You can walk outside, Rosie. You can walk outside. Look, and the thing that really messed me up about being, and it sticks with me today, right? And I got to work through this shit. And I don't know how to, but what sticks with me today was like every time I had to leave the cell, right? So we only got 3 days of yard, and yard was an hour each time. So we were in the cell 24 hours a day. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday was our yard time. We will go out for an hour and then come back in our cells. And then we would shower every other day, right? And we would shower for 10 minutes at a time. That was the only time we left our cell. Or we had an attorney visit or another visit. But that was the only time we left our cell, right? So, every time you leave your cell, though, right, you would have to strip all the way down, put your finger in your mouth, lift everything up, turn around, bend over, spread, and cough. Every single time you wanted to leave your cell. So I would refuse to leave my cell because I was tired of that. And that is demoralizing. And still to this day, I have an issue with somebody telling me, hey, you have to do this, because it takes me back to like, yo, do you know what I had to go through? And that just wasn't like in the shoe. I did 2 years in the shoe, but collectively in the whole, like so you have the whole, which is like just regular, the whole. Then you have the shoe, which is long-term placement for people who are doing these long-term, placement in the whole, and that's segregated housing units. So like I've been to the whole several times. So I think about 3 years out of my 8, I was in the hole. I every single time you would have to leave, you have to do that, and that is That's the worst. It's the worst to have to go through that. And people can say like, well, you shouldn't have did the crime. Like they won't even treat dogs like the way they treat you in the hole. Like
Yeah.
it's not what you see in the movies. It is literally like you are in a box and they leave you in there and you don't see nobody but twice a day when they bring your breakfast, when they bring your dinner, and maybe when they do mail. But that's it, you know. And you're just in there and you're in a box by yourself. Like that's not punishment. That's not accountability. That's not rehabilitation. To your point, that's torture. That's what it
It's
is.
torture. And we've had, I mean, there have been some of the political prisoners that have been in solitary housing unit for like 40 years, you know, but I think something my husband Justice always says, because he was formerly incarcerated, and he'll be like, you know, it is about time, not letting the time do you do the time, but it's also about like the minute you're in that condition, your whole world is going to change. And there's going to be repercussions emotionally coming out. Do you feel you can trust people? Do you feel like, you know, if you see some injustice happening, are you going to step in or out? It's a lot of psychological things that I still think we're missing when we have conversations around mass incarceration, because everybody fights for someone to get out, but they're not there after they get out. And it's not just the entry services, right? Like understanding how you broke it down. I think my husband could have owned a barbershop, but he was a felony convicted. What does that mean? You can't cut people's hair because they think you have a blade, basically, right? But you know, I was like, yes, we have to fight for people to come out, but where are the reentry services? You kind of said when you got out, there was something in you that you were like, yo, I'm never going back in, and I'm going to hit up everybody, and I'm going to become involved in community work and help other brothers and sisters, you know, doing that. But I still think we have to do better at finding psychological and therapeutic resources, because there's no way you're never going to remember that time. You just want, especially your children or people that you know and love, particularly to be in that situation. But you came out and you kind of just was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going back in, and I'm going to hit everybody up that I know and do this work. But am I incorrect to say you founded Californians for Safety and Justice?
Oh, no.
It was already an organization.
Yeah. So CSJ was founded by a group of funders who, you know, because in you know, California was sued, right? So a lot of people don't know like how like this wave of criminal justice reform hit hit America, right? So like California set the trend for mass incarceration, right? Like when we talk about 3 strikes, war on drugs, tough on crime, you know, when we talk about like Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, all those, that's California work. Like, and we exported all that stuff, right? And so like we were the first to build massive amounts of prisons. We weren't the first to have prisons, but we were the first to expand it, right? You know, in the 70s and 80s, when we closed down all of the mental health institutions, we built prisons. Like we literally like closed down mental health institutions, built prisons, and put the mentally ill in prisons, right?
Yeah.
And so fast forward to 2000s, you know, California prisons were so crowded while I was in there that one person would die every week from a preventable medical condition. Like every week, a person was dying. Like I was in there triple bonked, you know, like it was crazy. Like we were in there like sardines. And so somebody sued California and said, you know, this is a healthcare crisis. The prison law office sued them. They won in the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court said, California, you need to reduce your prison population because it is it's a health hazard, right?
Yeah.
So they said they needed to reduce it by to 137.5%, which I think the Supreme Court got it wrong. How do you tell a state to, you know, go 37.5% above what their capacity is supposed to be? But anyway, they did. And that was the beginning of reform. So California passed Prop 36, which diverted drug crimes. Proposition AB 109, which took state control and shifted it to local control to probation departments and expanded probation, which who, you know, depending on who you ask, is a good thing or a bad thing. And then it still wasn't enough to reduce the prison population. So a bunch of philanthropy got together and said who could actually pass ballot initiatives that could reduce this thing, you know, tremendously. And so they scanned the landscape, and at that time, because the CJ reform wasn't getting funded, like CJ reform wasn't a sexy thing in 2010, in 2009. Like people who were doing it were gritty, and they were like in the trenches for a long time. And so they said, you know, let's put some money together and create an organization. So they created Californians for Safety and Justice, and they hired Lenore Anderson. You know, she used to work with Van and used to work with Kamala and Gavin in the DA's office, and worked with Van and Ella Baker. And then she hired Mr. Robert Rooks, which used to work for the NAACP and DPA, helped the NAACP build out the criminal justice arm. He's a hell of an organizer. And they set on a journey to figure out not just, you know, how to end mass incarceration. They were like, okay, if you hire us, we want to get it something different, right? We want to take back this conversation around safety, right? Because that's what this is about, right? And when do we lose the narrative fight on safety, right? So they started to peel back that onion. And what they found was that, you know, over incarceration in America, and particularly in California, was built on the backs of white crime victims. And so they said, you know what? But most crime victims are people of color. Repeat crime victims are people of color. So they polled crime victims, and a majority crime victims said, listen, we don't want punishment. We want people to be held accountable, but we want them to like stop crime before it happens. You know, we want to invest in intervention and prevention. We want to invest in, like, you know, when people are held accountable, make sure that they don't, you know, that they have the tools they need so when they come home, they're successful so they don't commit crime. Overwhelmingly, victims said that. And so they started and they started our flagship program, Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, which is a network of over 30,000 crime survivors, mostly people of color, who are calling for intervention, prevention, investments in mental health, investments in victim services, and divestment in prisons and jails, because that'll make us safe, right? And that became the rallying cry for CSJ, and that's why we passed Proposition 47 in 2014, which decriminalized a lot of the theft crimes. We passed Proposition 57 in 2016, which expanded rehabilitative credits inside and gave the folks opportunity to earn their release. We passed ending money bail. We helped pass Amendment 4 with the leadership of Desmond. We were in Ohio, so it's been going on and on and on. But that right there, the beginning of CSJ was like the beginning of the end of tough on crime and the beginning of criminal justice reform in America, where you had Michelle Alexander writing her book. You had people talking more about, you know, divest, invest, and you start to see more of a conservative outcry for too much money going into prisons. And that is what, you know, that's what spawned California for Safety and Justice. Like I was in 2014, I was still on parole, and I was closing out my tenure in Stockton, and you know, closing out my program because all the kids I was dealing with had graduated high school, right? We got them all graduated high school, and I began to work on I got a job working on a congressional campaign, being their field director, and I was still on parole at this time. Like I lucked up, and so when I left there, that's when I got in contact with CSJ, and I worked my way up. And 5 years later, I'm running the whole organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think too, what, you know, I want to see is a lot of stuff decriminalized. Like, I don't think anybody should be going to jail for drugs, for sure. Yeah. Sex workers, like all of that. I mean, even today, like this guy, Michael Cohen, one of 45's people, he's serving his time. He gets paroled because of COVID-19, or they move him to house arrest. He starts talking about the book he's going to write about Trump, which he's not supposed to do. So then they bring him back, and then the judge today is like, no, it's too bad in there. It's COVID-19. You could go home. And it's like the numbers right now in California prisons of those infected are hitting the thousands. So I'm all, because in New York City, we always looked at California, or like you see, particularly in New York City, because New York City police, if they were their own country, would be the fifth biggest, largest military in the world. That you're like, what they started arresting my generation for was stupid ass shit, open bottle marijuana and jumping this turnstile. But once you're arrested, then you're in the secular system, which then keeps you like in a position of like, okay, well, I got to do something to survive. So that whole idea of like, who's committing crime? What does crime look like? Well, how do we talk about abolishing incarceration, knowing that there's so many forces that depend on that labor for them to be okay? That's it in upstate New York. In upstate New York, you're either working at a prison or a Walmart. There's nothing else. And that was before COVID. But in your work with Californians for Safety and Justice, I mean, you've now been, part of this larger Black Lives Matter movement, historical era. What is it that you think we're still missing when we talk about, hopefully not reform as much, dependent on policy, but what are we missing at this moment? Because I didn't see a lot of folks making those connections of like the brothers and sisters, the non-gender conforming people that are locked up. I understand why we have to fight police violence. I totally understand that. But I think we may be missing the opportunity around, first of all, people who've been incarcerated are the ones that have the answers, period. And you're one of those people and you're at that table. What is it you think we need to be focusing on?
I mean, it's so much, right? I think that there is this distinct, there's this distinct misconception about like what people actually want, and that's where, I mean, Carmen and I, we talk about this all the time, is what like, go home to your family members, right? Your brothers, your sisters, your mom, your dad, your cousins, right? And talk to them about, the work that you're in, right? The work that we collectively do. And that gives me a reality check every single time, right? I'm always calling my sister because my sister's, we're out here camping, and like, she's somewhat conservative, right? But she's conservative because she has very good reason to be conservative, like, not like Republican racist conservative, right? But like fiscal conservative, right? And so, like, I encourage people to get outside our bubbles, right? We live in a world of algorithms, and like the conversations that we have are dictated more by the platforms that we are having those conversations on than the people that are actually in those conversations, right? Yeah. And for me, it's all about like how to have real conversations with real people, how to get off the internet in one-on-one conversations with people that don't agree with us, right? People that look like us but may not agree with us, people that may not look like us and don't agree with us, people that may not look like us, agree with us, but probably are more racist than the people that don't look like us and don't agree with us, right? Like, there is so many through lines, and I like, one of the things like I always tell folks from the jump is, let's get out our bubbles, because when I first started out, I was like, hey, everyone that's getting out of prison should be, should have their records erased the day they step out of prison, right? And that was my thinking until I began to talk to people that were getting out of prison, and I began to talk to my family members, and they're like, well, what about this? So it created a whole different dialogue. Now, I still believe that, but it created a whole different dialogue about what people really truly feel, right? Yeah. And folks can be crusaders and push an agenda that they want for the people, because that's what a lot of people do. This is what people want. We're going to crusade and shove this message down your throat, which is cool. But then it causes divide, and people are like, normal people are like, well, wait a minute, I voted for that, but I really don't even understand what it means, or I really don't believe in it, right? So that's my first thing is like, we have to like quit letting Twitter and Facebook and Instagram dictate our conversations, right? And have real in-depth conversations. That's why I love you doing this, right? The second thing I believe is, you know, there are 70 million people with some sort of record in America. 70 million people, right? And you know, we face 48,000 legal restrictions. 48,000. You know, 58% of those legal restrictions are employment related, and 73% are lifetime bans. Like, I can never coach my son's little league team. I can never volunteer at Baby Justice's school. You know, I can never join my HOA. These are like lifetime bans. And what does that do to local communities? What did that do to, you know, cities? What did that do to families? And, you know, I internalize a lot of that shit, but I'm strong and I can work through it. But we need a nationwide reset, right? Like there is so much potential out there, untapped potential that, you know, and when you look at the movements, right, like you don't see a lot of formerly incarcerated people or people with convictions, because one, we don't like to be called fucking formerly incarcerated. Sorry. Like it's like, I don't want to be formally anything. I don't want to be known as having a conviction, because every time someone knows that I have a felony, there's a negative connotation that comes with that 100% of the time. And so like there needs to be a national reset and let people go on with their lives, because I can't even participate in some of these actions.
Mm-hmm.
I can't protect my family the way I want to protect my family. Like I don't even feel right. Like I can't own a gun. Like I can't even own a knife that's more than, you know, a certain amount of inches. How am I gonna protect my family? Right? Like, so I'm not even a full citizen. So when we talk about like, you know, oh, let's abolish prisons. Well, let's talk about like all the people out here that went through that system that are suffering out here. Some of us aren't suffering economically, but like our movements are suffering. Our movements are like, we are in a box. We are in a box, you know, and we can't. We
yeah, no, and I think
it's limited.
What you say about, yeah, and I think what you say about Crusaders is important, because I had to change my thinking around, you know, like using language that my husband would not use. Or I mean, I think one time we were talking about even voting, and I was talking to folks that had just gotten out, and they're like, I don't give two fucks about the vote. That's some shit y'all are doing. And it was like a wake-up call, kind of like, but no, don't you want your right back to vote? And they're like, we need jobs first, you know, which doesn't mean that you can't do the work as a movement and not have the option there. What it really comes down to is that you cannot do panels on mass incarceration or anything if you don't have people that have experienced that. Like, I don't understand how people have jobs forming policy and all that and have never stepped foot in a prison. But we're both buffering a lot, and I know why you are. So, and I'm glad. I'm very happy that you and the family are gonna have some time, because you have a new one coming in, you know, and you need that. And I just appreciate, like, I really appreciate your energy from the first day we met. You're just like a brother, like dope, but also the best stressed man in the movement, period. The best. I'm like, right now. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking time out of your family time, and you give my love to Carmen and everybody. And I really appreciate you being on with us tonight. So.
Thank you for having me. I just want to show everybody the
show us some nature. Yes.
Wonderful wilderness.
Yes.
You're out in the middle of nowhere. You got to get away sometime. Get away sometime, man. It's
yes,
the last phone call I'm doing.
My sister, who's watching, who works with an organization called Outdoor Afro, is clapping right now, seeing Black and brown people in a park.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
We out here.
Well, y'all still stay safe out there.
We'll do. All right, y'all. Peace.
I'll see you soon. Peace. Sorry it was buffering. It is what it is, you know. But check out Jay's incredible work at Californians for Safety and Justice. So look, so the way I'm ending tonight is that this will be my last episode for the show for a while. I have a dissertation to finish. Really, that's primarily the reason. The second reason is that this can't be a two-person team. We want to be able to bring a show like this and just keep getting better and better. But we need the resources to do that. And I've apparently pissed off almost everybody in the nonprofit industrial complex. So that's not going to pretty much be coming through for us. But we'll be back. And when I'm back, y'all can call me Dr. Clemente. And that's the goal. So I've been literally weaning myself off the addiction of social media. And once I end this broadcast tonight, there will be limited stuff coming from me, if anything. Maybe once in a while, we'll have to jump on, me and Tandy, and talk about something because it's that important that we have to, you know, address it. But I just want folks to remember there are now more than 4 million cases of COVID. Unfortunately, California and Florida are seeing the biggest increases. The supplemental insurance that many people who are unemployed, including me and a lot of people I know, they're not expanding that after this week, which means the average person who's employed is going to get $328 a month, $328 a week. That's $1,200 a month. People cannot afford to live anywhere for $1,200 rent unless you're in Albany or somewhere else. More people unemployed. This dude is trying to change now the way he's been acting. You know, it's all for show. People are not inspired by Joe Biden. And our people are the ones that are suffering the most from COVID right now, you know? So, and right now, South Africa has just reported they're the fifth in cases in the world. But what they're doing in South Africa too is they're beginning to experiment with a vaccine trial. And I think it's important that we understand that vaccines don't work the first time, you know. Some vaccine trials can kill people, you know, and then who gets the vaccine when it's ready? And how do you disperse it to 380 million people? Like, who's going to be on the top getting that, right? It's not going to be brothers and sisters, non-gender conforming people, queer, trans folks. People are not going to be on that list of the primary people that get the vaccine. And then legitimately, many of us don't trust the healthcare or the health sick system in this country. We don't, because we've always been the ones that they've tested things on. From Puerto Rico to Tuskegee, that has been the case. There's a lot of factors in this right now. And I think lastly, people are at their mental health brink right now. You cannot, it's just hard for everybody. I know that. And for my brothers and sisters and everybody else that's working, you know, we're going to have to figure out ways of setting boundaries, you know, because apparently when you're doing this, you got to be 24/7, and it's just causing people anxiety and stress, physical ailments. Like, all of this is happening, right? With that said, you know, I'll be back. The show will come back eventually. If anybody out there is a funder, hey, we could use 2 more producers, and then maybe I could just sit here once a week and do a show while I have a team producing it. But most and foremost, I can no longer be all but dissertation. I have to be Dr. Clemente, or I get kicked out of the program. So I just want to end. We've had 53 guests since we've done this show, right? So I'm super grateful that Tandy reached out and said, no, let's do something. Let's figure it out. We've had 53 guests, and they've all been incredible. I'm going to call them right now. Melina Abdullah, Victoria Reyes, Kali Akuno, Diana Asili, Jessica Caramore, Jason Reynolds, DJ Cotton Candy, Aja Monet, Jessica San Clemente, Gerald Ball, Rashard Robinson, Philip Agnew, Charles Barron, Inez Barron, Monifa Bandelli, Lumumba Bandelli, Nana Jumphy, Keen Noir, aka Hassan Salam, Jasmine, his wife, who's a clinical therapist, Dr. Joaquin Morante, who really was breaking down so much for us, Carmen Yulín Cruz, Dr. Maita Morena Vega, Shauna Redman, Naomi Klein, Eve Ensler, the incredible, powerful Drew Dixon, Christian Smalls, my homie Omeka, hip hop artist and organizer. We had Linda Sassor, we had Robin Kelly, Sekou Odinga, Nancy Mansour, aka Harabik Tubman, Carmen Perez, Mary Hooks, Dr. Cornell West, Roberto Lovato, Ed Morales. I forgot at the beginning we had Alejandro Ocasio-Cortez, Maria Isa, Rod Stars, Kendrick Sampson, Leah Penniman, Loida Limbal, Kat Brooks, and Jay Jordan. I love every guest we've had on. And really, these are the people that, for me, really amplify the radical imagination, but also that we have to not let the system take our joy, but we have to really become even more revolutionary than ever before. So these are the guests that we've had on. And I think it was an incredible 6 weeks, 8 weeks, and there's so many more people that I want to bring on. But as I said, we will figure out how to get back. If anybody out there knows about any monies that could fund us or anything like that, hit me up. I could turn the show over and just host once or twice a week while I'm finishing my dissertation on Afro-Latinx identity in the United States. So everybody, I appreciate you rocking with me. Everybody who's comrades, thank you for all your love and support and all of that kind of stuff. I'm here to support all of y'all, but most of all, I want to thank our producer, Tandi, who this show would not be happening without, period. It's not easy to pull off a show in any capacity, let alone 3 times a week. So as I say, and I end every show, stay up, stay safe, stay healthy, stay informed, inspire people and get inspiration from people, right? And I'll see you in the whirlwind next time as Dr. Clemente. Thank you, everybody. Peace.
They don't want you to know the truth.